Welcome to another edition of the show with no name. It's not often we have best-selling historical authors on the show, but when we do, it's always David Pietrusza, noted presidential historian. And we have dueling historians today because we have city historian, where were you, 27th Division historian as well?
New York State Military and Naval historian, director of the New York.
Which covers the whole ground.
Yeah.
Wow. Robert Van Hasseln, and of course Gavin Murdoch, my co-host of the day. Jim could not be here. It's just as well because we've only got 4 chairs. Let's start out with our city historian and new economic development director. We haven't had a chance to congratulate you in person. Congratulations on that appointment. Got some stuff coming up this weekend?
Lots. No pun intended, we have a boatload of activities going on at Riverlink, starting with the visit of a replica canal schooner from 1862, the Lois McClure, a very unusual boat in that it's also a keelboard, centerboard, and schooner-rigged canal boat, something you don't normally see.
So they sailed on the canal?
If they had the wind.
This is what really puzzles me, because the canal, most places, was pretty narrow, and yet they went by sail when they could.
Yes, it's something most people don't realize, but even back in the days of the Durham boats and the bateau,
yeah,
if you could catch a favorable wind and you weren't going against the current, you could set a sail to help you, give a little relief to them. In the early days, the men who were poling, and then later on the mules. But also, the McClure sailed on Lake Champlain. So once you get out to the lake, Lake Champlain,
the canal there.
Yeah.
Hard to pole.
Yep. So she has a centerboard which can be raised or lowered. So when you're out on the lake, and the natural tendency of the wind is to push on your sails and heel your boat over, the centerboard will correct that. But when you're in the narrow and shallow canals, you can lift the centerboard and be hauled by mules. So that's there. The tug Grover Cleveland will be there. You can go on board the McClure, and you should, because they also have an exhibit on the War of 1812, which I know you guys have been talking about. Yeah, very good, because it's specifically designed about the role of the New York waterways in the War of 1812, which is a topic that hasn't been covered very much. And then we have music at the park. We've got Misha and Reed Perry. Will be
no wonder you wanted
drumming.
to plug this.
Yeah. Plus we have 2 other Celtic acts. They'll be there throughout the
2 other
day.
what?
Celtic acts. I don't say Celtic. Celtic.
Oh, Celtic.
See, Celtic to me is a Celt is a dead fish. But
It's a smell.
yeah. We'll also have Alex Manzik, who designed the painted rock sculpture. She'll be there to interpret. And then on the south side, we've got HAL volunteers will be available to interpret Brockway's Basin, the Canal Store, the Path of the Canal. Old Fort Johnson is opening specifically during the period for visitors. And Schoharie Crossing will be open at Fort Hunter. And Greater Amsterdam School District is cooperating. They've been teaching canal history, working it into their curriculum this week, and then the kids can pick up a passport and take it around to all the sites. They answer a question, and the class with the most correct answers will win a prize from the school district in each school.
Wow.
So we got a lot going on. I don't even think I mentioned everything. It's all running basically 10 to 3.
What part did the waterways play in the War of 1812? The canal wasn't built yet. That probably would have helped quite a bit, actually.
You got to remember, before the canal was built, and one of the reasons the canal was finally pushed along was because of the logistics problems they had in the War of 1812. One of the major routes to get to the Niagara frontier, which was one of the 3 major battle theaters during the war on land, was up to the Mohawk. And you either moved along the Mohawk River, which had been somewhat improved in the 1790s, or you went along the Mohawk Turnpike. And everything that was necessary had to be hauled out, from guns for the ships on the Great Lakes to provisions for the horses and men at Sackett's Harbor. In fact, at one point, they call it the Great Rope Carry. They got as close as they could to bring out the rigging needed for Commodore Perry's ships, and couldn't get it any closer than 20 miles. So they lined up about 100 men to carry this thick hawser out from all the way from I think it was Oswego, where they landed, and then they brought it up. So basically everything that went out to that frontier came down the Mohawk Valley, including the militia when they were marching out to take part in the battles. One of the reasons why Greenbush became a major concentration and training camp over by Albany, because you could send troops from there up to the Lake Champlain, St. Lawrence frontier, or send them out the Mohawk to fight on the Niagara frontier. It's also one of the reasons why Waterloo.
The British kept reopening their plan to divide New York, left over from the Revolutionary War, and they were no more successful in the War of 1812 than they were in 1777. And,
I think they're probably less successful. Yeah.
No, they were less successful. They didn't get as far, right?
But they actually almost pulled it off. Whereas Burgoyne was probably doomed from the beginning because Clinton wasn't going to come up to join him from New York. The British forces coming down from Canada in the War of 1812 and stopped at the Battle of Plattsburgh actually were many of them were hardened veterans of Wellington's Peninsula Campaign. They were numerically superior to the Americans. The Americans had made a major strategic error by withdrawing troops from the Plattsburgh area and sending them out to Niagara just before the battle. And the British plan was in the process of working at the Battle of Plattsburgh. It had been delayed due to bad intelligence, but the British had finally gotten across the Saranac River and were about to turn the American defenses when Master Commandant MacDonough on the lake defeated the British. And at that point, the British general realized, there's no point. I'll never be able to protect my supply lines. So that's why they backed off. But a couple of hours difference on the lake.
A couple of hours.
And they might have been able to have defeated the Americans and at least seized Plattsburgh. And their goal wasn't really so much to come down to Albany as it was to take the pressure off the St. Lawrence.
Well, they were messing with us.
Well, they wanted to make sure we couldn't. The British fought basically a defensive war. The British were like us in the Revolution. All they had to do was not lose, whereas we had to do something. Otherwise, what do we have to negotiate with? And that's one of the interesting things about the war. It's one of those wars that, with all the battles, with all the casualties, with all the expense of treasure, at the end of the war, everything was just exactly as it was before the war started. I mean, even the things we went to war about, like impressment of seamen and what we call, free trade and seamen's rights, nothing changed. In fact, most of the things we complained about to the British revoked just about the time they received our declaration of war. It's just
one thing that did change was, even though the strategic balances of power remained the same, was that the American Navy got a lot more respect than they ever had before, because they were at least fighting the British to a draw, whereas the French, who had been fighting them all out for a generation, never were able to.
That was the time when a lot of our naval traditions were actually set. The battles of the Constitution versus the Guerriere, the various other ships. That's where Old Ironside gets her name. We had a wonderful class of frigates that were superior in design to anything the British had. And
which is amazing in and of itself, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim did make it.
No.
All right, well, we got to find another chair for him. That one's a little. Well, I guess we got one now.
The big outcome of the war, and I hope they feature this in the exhibit, is that even though it didn't change anything with the Americans or the British, what it did is it set up a 200-year pattern of, we don't need to go to the war with the British about things. We can talk it out.
Yeah.
We had a lot of things to deal with.
Good morning, guys.
Hey, Jim, now we're looking for a chair for you here.
There's a chair right there.
Well, all right. It's a little damp, but that's okay.
How are you?
Let's see you.
Haven't seen you in a while.
No.
Oh, Jim, how are you?
Hey, Jimmy.
Yep.
Don't worry. I guess pull on tight on Rob there, and so we'll see what we can do.
The message was for the wrong Friday.
Oh,
It's
oh,
next
okay.
Friday.
Oh, next Friday maybe I won't make it. I don't know. We'll see.
Jim, wash that hand when you get a chance. I forgot I'm sick.
Anyway. If you want a drier one, you might find one around the pool there.
that's all right.
What happens? It's rained a little bit. It's almost autumn.
Tomorrow,
Okay.
in fact.
Tomorrow, yes,
Yeah.
last day of summer. Last day of summer, and we're here at the our beautiful outdoor studio. We don't know how many more weeks we're going to be able to do this, but it sure has been swell for the last half a dozen weeks.
Oh, great.
Boy, oh boy, every Friday's been fantastic. Fantastic. All right, we'll get back to you a little bit more, but as long as we've got the best-selling author here, we have here David Pietrusza, author of his most recent published book, 1948, Harry Truman's Improbable Victory in the Year That Transformed America. And the book's been doing pretty well, huh?
It's done pretty well, yeah. Got some good reviews, got some good publicity, and probably helped push me over the top to get on C-SPAN's in-depth program, where they shot it, I think, July 1st, and then they repeated it last weekend, which surprised me. I didn't know if they were going to repeat it ever. I thought it would just sort of live on the internet forever if it lived anywhere. And that was
a great program.
That's a great opportunity and an honor, because you take a look at the people who have appeared on it, and it's not like, you know, they send the camera out to some library or Barnes and Noble or something like that, and they do that, and a lot of folks obtain that, and that's a great thing in itself. But to be elevated to in studio 3 hours, they only do that once a month, so it's I couldn't figure out whether that was somewhere between the All-Star Game and the Hall of Fame, and I'll take either.
I guess so. I guess so. And I remember we talked about it before you went on. You were a little, what am I going to talk about for 3 hours? That 3 hours flew.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was shot at noon on a Sunday, and if you're going to do 3 hours live on national television, I would recommend praying in advance. And so, and I go to Mass anyway, so I went to Mass beforehand, and afterwards, out on the street, I was talking to Pat Buchanan, and said, Pat, we had done Joe Scarborough together. He was remote from Washington. I was in the studio in New York, and told him where I was going. And he said, "Oh, in depth." He says, 3 hours is easy.
For Pat Buchanan, he
says radio is hard. 5 minutes is hard, because in 3 hours you can get a head of steam going, and in 5 minutes you're sort of truncated, and then you're off. So in a way, 3 hours is a great opportunity, and also they're talking about what you do. They're not talking about what Peggy Noonan does, or John Lukács does, right, or Maureen Dowd. It's like, I couldn't do that for 3 hours, but I hope I can talk about what I do for 3 hours.
And
so
you did.
I did. So and
you took calls.
Took calls, not from Washington, because the power grid went out. That was a wonderful weekend. It was 103 degrees in Washington on Friday. And I walked down from the Capitol to my hotel, and I was absolutely drenched, and for the remainder of the weekend was almost afraid to go out of the hotel. And the power had gone out. The host of the show, Peter Slan, his power had gone out. So he was like, reading, he was reading Rothstein the Saturday afternoon beforehand out on his back porch, because that's where the only place he had light. And he came out, but in the heat, and I at least had air conditioning, but I was like almost on an air shaft in the hotel. The window was about this big, so I felt like I was in some cone of silence or something. I was in tune.
Are they on? Your microphone's on?
The microphones are on. Yes.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
And it was, but at the end of the show, it's like, we didn't get any calls from Washington, which was in a way maybe good or bad. And
well, it was definitely an outside the Beltway program.
It was an outside the Beltway program. We got a lot of calls from North Carolina,
deep
much
south,
to my amazement.
South and the deep south.
And a lot of calls on baseball, which I was a little concerned about, because I'm a bit rusty in that field.
But you used to be, before you were noted presidential historian, you were noted baseball historian.
I suspect they don't get a lot of people who've written baseball on in depth for some reason. So they were doing that, and that's what you do.
Wow. Well, we've got there's a lot of interest in 1948, the book and the election this year, of course, because there are some obvious parallels. You had an incumbent president running against the northeastern moderate governor, Republican governor, and Harry Truman pulled that election off when nobody expected him to. Of course, polling in those days was not the daily event that we have these days.
No,
right?
I mean,
Gallup was like brand new, I think.
Well, they've been around, and what Gallup would do is Gallup had a newspaper column, and you'd see it running, I don't know if it was every week or every month, but they would run the data. I mean, maybe the data wasn't as deep as it was, but they would put these things out probably by region and by party or whatever, and instead of some joker on the internet parsing what the poll said, Gallup would put the thing out themselves in a newspaper column. They get it fairly right, or less wrong than the others. Roper gets it seriously wrong. They stopped polling in mid-October. Maybe they would have gotten it right if they had kept it up.
You got a mosquito on your
but
forehead.
Roper gets the race to within 5 percentage points in the last week of the election. And if you factor in
5% is quite a bit,
yeah,
though, isn't it?
Well, if you factor in the margin of error of 3 and 4%, and then factor in that there's 2 third-party candidates, is that right?
Well, that's
is that
true.
a third or fourth party? Candidates in, and third-party totals tend to fall off at the end. And one of the things that finally alerts the Dewey people that maybe the wheels are falling off election night is the Henry Wallace totals in Connecticut. Those come in really early, and it's like, no one's voting for Wallace. He's getting like 1.3% or something.
Why don't you set up the scheme?
Well, what you got is you've got a 4-man race. You've got Harry Truman, who's the embattled incumbent. You've got Tom Dewey, the moderate, bland northeastern governor, and the Democratic Party splits 3 ways. Democratic Party splits 3 ways, which is, it's bad enough when your party splits 2 ways. You might be able to pull something off, but when it splits 3 ways, the only time previously that had happened was in 1860. When not only the parties, there's a civil war in the Democratic Party, there's a civil war in America.
Yeah.
So 3 ways, not good. The Dixiecrats, the Southern segregationist National States' Rights Democrats, have a plan. We're going to take the electoral college votes, and Dewey's going to do sufficiently well one way or the other, and we're going to throw this into the electoral college, and we're going to make Harry Truman and the Northern Democrats see that we're the base, we're the real Democrats, be nice to us again, recognize our concerns, which is segregation. They have this plan. On the left, Henry Wallace, who had been Secretary of Agriculture under FDR and then Vice President and was dumped from the ticket in 1944 in favor of Harry Truman, or really just to dump him, and then Harry Truman was the choice to replace him as the candidate who would do the least amount of harm. He is then dumped again as Secretary of Commerce by Harry Truman. So it's not surprising that he's kind of ticked at Harry Truman. He is naturally left-wing.
Yeah, but he was also making speeches in opposition to his own government's foreign policy.
Well, he's naturally left-wing to begin with. You put all that together, and then literally members of the Communist Party USA take over his campaign, and they want to punish Harry Truman for something else, which is the Cold War, for not rolling over to Uncle Joe Stalin enough. And they are, that's the scenario, and things look tough for Harry Truman. And of course, the other similarity is the tension between the president and the Congress. 1946, the Republicans take over the Congress again, and in 1948, Harry Truman derides the do-nothing 80th Congress, and you see a repeat of this in 2012, 2010 to some extent, but of course, Republicans only have one house of the Congress, and really the do-nothing Congress or House at this point is the United States Senate, which hasn't passed the budget in what, 3 years, going on 4 years.
4 years, I think.
And thank God they're not doing anything.
Now, did the Republicans have the Senate in '46?
Yeah, they won the Senate. They won the House. A lot of the
So it must have looked like a sure thing for the Republican
well, that was the
presidential
trend.
candidate.
Usually that presages, the trouble for the incumbent in 2 years. And it certainly, Truman's totals go down from FDR's, but Dewey's also go down. He gets a smaller percentage of the vote in 48 than when he ran in 44.
Is that right?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking, or the raw vote is less. Now, I was thinking about this the other day. Dewey runs in 44, and if he had not run in 44, I think he might pull it off in 48. And the reason for that is usually if you do something, you fall short, you fail, you learn from it. You get better. Dewey learned all the wrong lessons from 44. It's like, well, I criticized FDR on Pearl Harbor, and people thought I was harsh and wrong, and they thought I was mean, and so I'm not going to talk about foreign policy. And I won the Midwest in 44 and lost the East. So I'm going to concentrate on the East, and I'm going to ignore the Midwest. He loses the election in the Midwest, basically, in 48.
But of course, in 44, he had the Midwestern vice president.
He had John Bricker of Ohio, who was sort of like the charismatic Robert Taft. Very conservative guy, but on the stump, really quite personable. Dewey appears, makes one speech in Ohio in 1948.
Wow.
And at that event, well, two things happen. One, the train pulls into Ohio. A crowd gathers in the night and wants him to come out. He refuses to come out. He goes on stage with Robert Taft and stiff arms him. And Taft says, I don't know why he hates me so. Not good. Dewey was not well loved within the party.
Certainly not within the Midwestern. And of course,
no, and also he had double-crossed Charlie Halleck. People from who remember the 1960s may remember the Ev and Charlie show of Everett McKinley Dirksen and Charlie Halleck, who was less
the House minority.
Yeah, they looked sort of like a used car salesman, and kind of a bulbous kind of guy.
The two of them did the first
opposition
State of the Union type thing. That's when that whole genre developed, when you had the Republican response.
Well, when you got Everett McKinley Dirksen doing it, you've got something. And Halleck,
voice of a Wurlitzer organ, and a hair combed by an egg beater.
Yes.
The Chero look.
He left Congress in the mid-40s. Because he was going blind.
Is that right?
Yeah, he was in the House, and he was going blind. He was losing his vision. And somehow he got it back and returned to Congress and became Everett McKinley Dirksen.
Wow.
So Charlie Halleck was basically promised the vice presidency. Basically promised in politics means,
Right.
It's one level above promised.
Right.
The vice presidency if he delivered the Indiana delegation to Dewey at the convention. And they said, Charlie, you weren't really promised. Grow up. And they not only did that, but he was so craven for attention at that point. He wanted to, I think, put his successor or second to nomination. They wouldn't even let him do that. So it's sort of a pathetic figure that year. But there you go.
He was kind of an obvious candidate for vice president, wouldn't he be? Given his.
Well, not really. Well, the Eastern
they,
establishment was very down on him.
I understand that, but they should have wanted to balance the ticket like they did.
Well, they should have in 44, but Dewey was going to. First off, when you're going to win, you don't have to worry about such things. You don't have to worry about such things. And in 48, he's balancing it geographically. He's, you know,
Mr. Conservative Earl Warren.
Who was to the left of Dewey and is probably to the left of Stassen. You've got 4 guys, well, maybe 5 counting MacArthur, running that year. And really the Taft's campaign is so poor, very disorganized. But you know, you've got 3 moderate to left-wing guys running in the Republican race, and they're all fairly serious contenders. Dewey and Stassen and Warren, who is the favorite son candidate from California. And if there had been a deadlock, who knows? And then, of course, a lot of people were betting if there was a deadlock, if Dewey fell short, and, you know, he doesn't get it until like the 4th ballot or so, and he's not loved, so he could fall short. There were a lot of people voting on Arthur Vandenberg, the sort of Me Too Republican guy on foreign policy, to be the eventual nominee. So the party is fractured, and it's not the conservative party. It is after, I hesitate to say after Goldwater, because Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford and the Bushes follow Goldwater, but you now get at least the lip service to conservatism from candidates who are, shall we say, not fully in sync with it.
And in those days, there was quite the opposite. I mean,
you said you were a liberal.
You look at the stuff.
Robert Taft said
we're the liberal party.
Yeah. So it's changed. It's changed.
And of course, Wendell Willkie just he considered conservatives just a pariah.
Anathema.
I mean, anathema, yes. Let them be
anathema. You know, and it really it starts with Landon. It starts. Hoover is the progressive candidate in 28 among the party. The old guard tried to stop him, but they really can't get a head of steam going. And a lot of presidential politics is predicated from TR to Hoover by people dropping dead. So in 1928, the conservative contender against Hoover was a guy named Frank B. Willis of Ohio, and he drops dead. And like literally on the stump, like he's giving a speech and he just falls over dead, and that helps clear the way for Hoover. And TR's path is it's not just the McKinley assassination, but he's in because the vice president dies before that.
Right.
And then the big Democratic challenger, a guy named Whitney, who had been the Secretary of Treasury under Cleveland, he drops dead. And Mark Hanna,
was he the conservative Democrat?
He was one of the conservatives. I mean, they end up with Parker, but Whitney would have been stronger. And Mark Hanna, the conservative mentor of McKinley,
you want some more coffee?
is he drops dead and paves the way for TR. So there's a lot of that going on. Not to mention, you go down the road or the canal. You go down the canal to Utica, and in 1912, the Vice President of the United States, a guy named Sherman, James Sherman,
from Utica,
former congressman from Utica, drops dead in October, just before the election. That's what I call a bad campaign. That Taft campaign had real. I didn't even bother to name anyone new. And speaking of Utica, before the War of 1812, well before it, some folks see that the Mohawk Valley is the growth area. This is great, and one of them is a fellow who hadn't been to New York until say the 1780s, 90s. A guy named George Washington. He makes 2 tours after the Revolution of New York. That's why you see all those houses in Schenectady. George Washington's left here, etc. And his eyes get big because one thing that George Washington knew how to do just about everything. And he knew how to develop wilderness land. And he says, wow, this place is great. He buys 6,000 acres of land in partnership with Governor Clinton in the Utica area. They know this is gonna pop, and it does. Unfortunately, it's exploded since, but it popped for a long time.
Sure. Well, wait, are you saying that Governor Clinton, who built the canal?
No, this is the
older Governor Clinton.
This is the other.
Oh, this is Uncle George.
Yeah.
He was vice president, wasn't he?
I think he was, yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
Died in office, in fact.
Wow.
There you go.
Another one.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. And of course, George Washington understood canals too. He was involved in the
yes, and that's
Ohio,
how
right?
he becomes involved in the Constitutional Convention. It's the events leading up to building that canal because they needed to get a compact between Virginia and Maryland. And the wheels start turning. It's like, okay, let's rewrite what we've got, and let's work together with the states. And he was, instrumental in doing that. And so that's what jumpstarts the move for a constitutional convention is that canal.
Commerce,
canals. That's it. Infrastructure.
Interstate commerce. Wow.
Infrastructure that makes sense.
What do they call those? What kind of improvements are they?
Internal
improvements.
That was the Republican plan.
That was the Republican
Hamilton
plan.
Until, Hamiltonians.
Yeah.
Until what? I don't know. It was in their. I was going to say their charter, their
platform.
Through the 19th century, anyway, right?
Oh yeah, I think all.
Yeah.
Did Truman have a deal with the party that when he ran for president, or that they were going to back him, or
a deal?
Yeah, that.
No, and most of the party didn't want him. Even the people who eventually didn't bolt.
How well known was he when he suddenly became president in April of 1945?
Moderately. I mean, he'd been on the ticket in 44. His investigation of the war industry and building up the defense plants and the army bases, he had given a report of, there were some reports coming into the Congress, and they gave him $15,000 to investigate the whole war effort, which was like even not a lot of money then. So he
wouldn't even buy a quarter of his secretary.
No. So he got in his car and drove around and looked around and actually listened to people, and what people had to say wasn't wonderful. And he delivers a report on the floor of Congress, and it's very balanced and nonpartisan and patriotic, and really helps win the war, or win the war with less waste and less bloodshed, less expenditure of treasure, and wins the respect of both parties at that point. So that's why he's on the ticket in 44. He's on the ticket in 44 because prior to that report, he's a nobody. He's a hack. He's from the Pendergast machine. And so he's the vice president, but even in 44, the Republicans aim a lot of flack at him. Is he a Klansman? Okay.
Was he?
He paid the $10 to join. He wanted it back.
$10.
$10. Well, yeah.
That's serious money.
Well, that's when the Klan got its growth, it was because they hired a public relations firm, and I think they got to keep $6 or $8 of every token or whatever they called it to join.
The public relations firm?
Yes,
yeah.
they got the bulk of the dough.
And then they made the money off the robes and everything else.
Yeah, there was a big merchandising thing. Sure,
yeah. It's like the school uniform business.
Yeah,
exactly. And so he wanted for whatever reason, as soon as he did that, he wanted the money back. Maybe because he worked for like Irish Catholics in Kansas City. I don't know. But he drew back from that, and also what they went at was, of course, the fact that he was connected to that Pendergast machine, and also that his wife and several of his relatives were on the Senate payroll, and he really resented that attack. Anything about Bess, payroll Bess, and she was, I think, the top paid staffer Now, of course, Truman didn't have a lot. He had no sources of income besides the Senate salary. And to maintain...
Which wasn't so hot back then.
Wasn't so hot. Wasn't so hot. And, you know, we complain about these congressmen, but unless they're very wealthy, this is not such a great gig to be having to shuttle back and forth and maintain 2 residences. This is, you know, I will say it. If you're Paul Tonko, you know, this can be an expensive proposition to be able to do that. If you're Chris Gibson, same thing. It's a different thing if you're Amo Houghton or Jane Harmon, but for the average person, it's not easy.
It can be as much a sacrifice as...
It is. I mean, wasn't Paul Ryan like sleeping on a cot or something in his
that's
office?
Right. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
It's criticized for that.
Yeah.
You know, personally, I like frugality.
Yeah. So Truman, they almost dumped him a week before the convention. They wanted Eisenhower in. A very strange coalition.
48 we're talking about.
Very strange coalition of Southern segregationists, Northern liberals, big city bosses. I mean, you got Hubert Humphrey and Strom Thurmond, members of the Roosevelt family. They're all saying, get rid of this guy. And for one thing, Eisenhower's not cooperating because why board a sinking ship, which is the Democratic Party in 1948. And Truman replies in very pungent language that any who sits behind this desk can get renominated if he wants it.
Oh, this is a podcast. You can say whatever you want.
Well, but I'm not. I'm not.
Wow.
I'm not sure if I did it in the book.
Oh, you said a lot of things in the book. I left that one out.
I have been, yes.
The N-word shows up quite a bit.
It does. It does. And I think that's appropriate because that's. Otherwise,
History
you're just.
was what it was when it was,
right.
not what we wish it were today.
It was.
Yeah. And you can't change that.
I'm quite surprised even last night to see what goes on Turner Classic Movies.
Yes.
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 Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wasn't that
What
woman?
was it?
It was gems, screen gems or something of MGM screen gems.
It had to be like
Benny,
1928
1931. I've seen 2 dates for it. It was Benny Rubin, who I guess could still do what he does. Rubin was a Jewish dialect comedian, very much so, and a lot of stuff he would do.
It was a great look at vaudeville, wasn't it?
It was a great look at vaudeville. But what he does, he comes out for his second turn and his third, I think. And he does it in blackface.
And crudely.
And very, very crudely. The first, and he comes in with a whoom. I mean, really. And but beyond that, well, you know, the last act was the Brox sisters, who are famous for what?
I don't know.
The Brox sisters
were about that.
Well, I'm sure you wondered about the Brox sisters, and that's BROX. They were the act with the dancers and the singers and Ukulele Ike, Cliff Edwards.
Oh, Ukulele Ike, who was Jiminy Cricket in
right,
Pinocchio.
and
Singing in the Rain.
In the Singing in the Rain. That's them.
Oh, they do the routine with him.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. I thought they looked vaguely familiar.
I thought that the woman in the middle, Marion something or other, did you see that part?
Yes.
That was great. That
Yes.
was such an amazing performance that you marvel at the stuff that was on.
And the
quality.
Yes.
It tugged at your heart.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful.
Just
She
a
said,
piano.
was there even a piano?
Yeah, I think there was a piano in the background, and she was just singing to the piano. And you think how simple it was.
It was so simple,
and it was
riveting.
moving.
It was riveting.
Yes.
And it kind of makes you think, what other things in the whole history of mankind we focus on the stuff we have recorded,
right,
and think this is, and it's like, you know, what was seen,
yeah,
and we feel so superior to everyone, and if we could see what they produced and how, I mean, we can still see the artifacts,
yeah,
the great art, but of the performing art, that is lost.
Yeah. You know, I think about it. In '67, I went to New York and saw Pearl Bailey and Cab Calloway in Hello Dolly. Now, first of all, the show is terrific. If you've heard that cast album, it's the definitive cast album. Never mind, you know, Carol Channing and the original cast. It's been recorded like 4 or 5 times with the original cast. That is the definitive album with Pearl Bailey and Cab Calloway. Completely against type, obviously, because it was an all-black cast. The show was out of this world terrific. And at the end, you know, they come out to this thunderous standing ovation, and Pearl Bailey just says, "Sit down. Everybody sit down."
Oh, right.
This is what we call the third act. And she and Calloway do a 20-minute nightclub act at the end of the show. And I'm watching this and I'm saying, nobody but me and everybody here is going to ever remember this happened. And it was magic. It was absolute, total magic,
well,
and never recorded.
That's the ephemeral nature of the live theater. It's here and then it's gone. But there is a magic to the live. It's a shame it wasn't recorded. A show which you and I have been, maybe just once, to the Musicals Tonight in New York. What did we see? Just one show there?
The you and I, yeah.
And what this fellow does, I think he made his money somewhere. I hope he made his money somewhere.
Is he sure as heck isn't making it on this?
I don't think so. He's got some donors. But what he does is he takes in New York City and has a small theater. He had one on the Upper West Side. Now he's on 42nd Street. And what he does is he resurrects absolutely forgotten musicals. And in some cases, deservedly so. If you see a forgotten musical by like a Cole Porter or someone, like a real name composer, there's maybe a reason for that. But the forgotten musicals from people you've never heard of can be amazing. I saw a show called 3 Wishes for Jamie, which was an incredibly Catholic musical. and
with a capital C?
With a capital C. It had been based on a story which had won the Christopher Award previously, and it talked about like adoption and fertility of people, and it was so moving that not only was the music was beautiful, and not only was I crying, but all the liberal Upper West Side ladies in the audience on either side of me, whatever, small C, large C, everyone was just in tears, and the music was so beautiful. And I went afterwards, or actually I think he said from the stage, the producers, and this will never be produced again. This show will never be produced again. And I was just so lucky to see it. Another thing, years ago, I was taken to see a show in New York called, I forget what it was called. I've forgotten it. And what it was is they had resurrected all the dance numbers from Broadway shows that flopped.
Ah.
Yeah. And songs from flops can live afterwards.
Well, one you just saw was that one from like '62 that had Ray Bolger in it originally. I can't even remember the name of the show now. And the show didn't last very long, maybe 100 performances, but it had "Once Upon a Time, a Girl with Moonlight in Her Eyes."
Yeah,
I mean, one of the great standards of all time comes from a show that was completely forgotten.
Right. But the dance numbers are not seen, and it was called the Broadway Dance Machine.
Okay.
And what they did was they staged all these incredible numbers from shows that would never be seen again, and it's like, because staging dance numbers or Broadway, it's really expensive. So it's good that these things are brought back, but that's about the only place they're going to be brought back, and even they're they're brought back in truncated forms. It's almost like seeing a concert version of these things, as you would see a concert version of an opera. I mean, you've got performers standing there with scripts in their hands. They're young kids. They've got no time to rehearse.
Right, no rehearsal time.
No rehearsal time, almost at all. And then they go on. It's best to buy your tickets for the final performances, because that's when they've been rehearsing in front of you.
We saw the show we saw together was Panama Hattie, which at the time was a reasonably big show.
Yeah,
it became a
Ethel Merman
a movie. The original cast, when you look at it, is like out of this world. You not only had Ethel Merman in the starring role, the secondary role was played by Betty Hutton. If you can imagine that kind of energy on the same stage at the same time.
No.
In the chorus were June Allison, Vera Ellen, and Lucille Bramer, who was my grandfather's cousin, who was with Fred Astaire, and she's from Amsterdam.
I knew we were going.
But the talent in that show was out of this world. And a Cole Porter show, and one number that was kind of vaguely familiar, the biggest number of the show, but the rest were just all forgotten Cole Porter stuff, and none of it bad. It was all pleasant. You know, you could see that they might have been throwaway songs from any number of his other shows that they recycled, but it was good. It was pleasant. It was a nice afternoon. What does it seat? 80 people in the theaters? I mean, you can't imagine how they could possibly break even.
That
on
was
the show.
99 seats.
Yeah.
And I think they've taken it down in their new house to less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Economized.
Yeah.
And they charge, I think they've raised it to $27 a pop.
So how can they possibly break even?
They have a lot of donors. There's a big list of donors. I don't know.
Now, what's he put on, like 7 shows a season or something?
Maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah. They run for what, 2-3 weeks.
That's it, and then off, and then back again. Get in. He actually has trouble getting rehearsal time. In the old Playhouse on Broadway and 72nd, which was 4 stories up, in like an office building almost. You know, there's a store on the ground floor or something. We weren't. It's like, why are we all waiting outside the theater when the thing is going to start like in 5 minutes? You know, the audience is all outside there, and it's like, because somebody was rehearsing. Somebody was rehearsing another show before they went on. But that's, I guess that's the magic of
who's got the time?
People who care about stuff, which is, I guess, explains this stage.
Yeah.
10 of 11.
This is a great stage, isn't it?
It's a fine stage.
You've seen it.
This is my first in this venue. Yes.
Yes, this is
going to be tough. And this will live on for posterity too, though.
This performance will remain forever.
Or until there's a YouTube.
As long as there's a YouTube, or I keep paying the show with no name, yearly rate to maintain the website. Yeah, it'll last.
But these performances that never recorded is not unlike the great ball games that existed before TV. That everything now is the greatest.
Yes.
Yet many of those things have been repeated over time. You did have great plays. You had great players. Yeah. You had great thrilling series going on. But yet now, when you look at 25 great.
No.
It's only what you've seen since ESPN has been on.
Well, it's even when you do have the material, if you go to imdb.com and see what the greatest films are in history by the viewers, it's like, no, they all haven't been in the last 10 years. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm old, but I'm sorry. This is not true. Not true at all. It's just amazing.
Well, thank God for TCM, because we're seeing stuff that never would have been seen otherwise. So, they've been doing the Max Sennett thing all month. And a lot of it is not very good, actually.
No, if you read Walter Carr's book, The Silent Clowns, he devotes a very long chapter as to why Max Sennett was not very good.
But he was certainly prolific.
Yeah, and what he did have was an eye for talent.
Yeah.
And the talent operated at a level far above him. So Chaplin and Arbuckle
And
and
Buster
Langdon. No, not Keaton. Keaton joins Arbuckle after Arbuckle leaves.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. But so he's one step removed from him. But yeah, he and Luis Fazenda or whoever. So he develops these people, but they go on to better things because they're better than him.
I was watching most of.
But there were laugh out loud moments.
Oh,
in
yeah,
those
oh,
films.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
they're so uneven.
Down on the Farm was his first apparently full feature length. But I'm watching that last night, and I said, "This is not a feature-length film. This is one reelers strung together."
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
that's all it was.
It
Some
was
of the same
so
characters would
disjointed.
move out, but there was no rhyme or reason to it at all. It
I
was,
thought the dog was amazing.
the dog was amazing. Those were single shots. The dog would come out with a pail of water, with an empty pail, put it in the trough, go in, grab it with his teeth, get out of the trough, and go feed the cow, and it's all in one shot. Filling the pail and getting out. And this is.
How about when he lifts the kid up?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. He's out there chasing the kid who was being chased by the geese and the ducks. and-
Yeah.
Or he saves him from the fake waterfall,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
they shot in superimposing the stuff in the camera.
It's so hard. You can get some great political and historical insights from some of those TCM films too. They had one on the other day called Gabriel Over the White House,
That's a famous one.
and
Which I had never seen.
a lot of people haven't seen it, and it's amazing. And Walter Easton, and plays this sort of odd role. It's sort of, part Franklin Delano Roosevelt, part Adolf Hitler, and I think that's one of the reasons it tanked at the box office, because he comes in as the Depression replacement president, like Roosevelt, and but he begins on a program of like, we're going to declare martial law, and the Army will enforce police duties, and there's a wonderful speech. It's almost verbatim. It's like Hitler's Reichstag speech, and he's in there and he's saying, now, you're going to suspend Congress because it's a state of emergency and we can't get anything done while you sit. And I'm like, whoa, this is pretty uncomfortably,
Well,
fascist.
you look at some of those early Busby Berkeley films, and I'm thinking especially, I don't know whether it was Gold Digger. It wasn't Gold Diggers at 33.
It's the Forgotten Man thing. They're giving the Hitler
I was
salute.
going to get to the Forgotten Man, but there's that the other one that ends with this big production number that includes everything turns into the NRA Eagle
Yeah.
and a picture
Yeah.
of Franklin
Right.
Roosevelt, and I'm like, God, this is like fascism at its best.
Well, I think-
It's just with adore the leader thing, and this is a
Entertainment. It's a musical.
yeah, it's a musical.
It's a
and
great musical.
and it's like in the first year of Roosevelt's administration, or the second. So I mean, it was strange.
Well, I
And
think
the Forgotten Man thing is now. I'm watching. I forget one of these cable channels. The cable channels all show the same commercials 40 times in a row. Every break, you get the same commercials. And one of the commercials it's either for Viagra or one of those similar substances. The guy with the pickup truck, and he has to let something out to haul the truck, and and it's all supposed to be a metaphor for his erectile dysfunction or something, whatever. But there's the music playing in the background. It's kind of a jazzy beat. And I think, God, this sounds familiar. It's the Forgotten Man.
Really?
It's yes. It's the Forgotten Man that's sung by Joan Blondell in the Gold Diggers of 33. Yeah. They
I
just
think
dug it out of no place.
I think Jonah Goldberg talks about fascist films of that era, and what he's talking about is also that there's a vigilante films where it's like beyond Dirty Harry, and where and they often have Walter Houston in them. Yeah, it's like Walter Houston is.
He was in a remarkable number of
awful films.
Well, not just awful, but propaganda films.
Well, yeah. Well, he was
Of course,
also
he was a star of Mission to Moscow.
right. Yeah. But where it's like, okay, we're tired of dealing with these gangsters. We're just going to go out and kill them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, vigilantism was not always, considered in the same light it is today.
It wasn't frowned upon. It was something you had to do.
something you had to do. You know,
There's a famous lynching of two guys in California in the 30s, and they're white. I think it's around Oakland.
well, Zane Grey's Desert of Gold is was that the name of it? I think it was Desert of Gold. It was a contemporary at the time, like in 1919, sort of Western, where the cowboys take on the commies. Where the what were they called? The Wobblies, the International
IWW. Yeah, I could see that.
They're out there organizing the field workers, and they're burning the fields if they don't, if the owners don't organize. And in the end, the owners just do what they have to do. They go out and lynch them and hang them from the bridge. And
that's the Centralia. That's the Centralia massacre of 1919 in Washington.
And it's treated as, we don't like having to do this, but this is the only thing we can do.
Well, Franklin Roosevelt blows into Centralia on the campaign trail in 1920 and doesn't seem to have a problem with it.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's in 1920, the year of the 6 presidents. Available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Oh, who wrote that?
Me.
Ah. Yeah. By the way, you're also working on.
I'm working on that, which will have a slightly different cover. We keep fluctuating.
Yeah, I keep finding draft copies of this on my doorstep. I'm not sure which edition this is.
I don't know.
It's a Calvin Coolidge documentary biography, which may be out sometime.
Yeah, well, that's probably going to come out in 2013, and we're working on another Coolidge book, which is Calvin Coolidge on the Founders, which. He had a habit. Well, he from the earliest age, and he wins a gold medal as a college student, best in the nation, for writing on the foundation of the American Revolution. And he continues with this his whole life, and the Coolidge luck continues. So that as he's vice president, for one thing, he explains it in his autobiography. I was a vice president. I was a lieutenant governor. I didn't make policy. So when I would go out, I talk about these big themes, and a lot of them involve the revolution and the founders. And then the Coolidge luck kicks in, where this thing he really knows a lot about starts the 150th anniversary of all these things in the revolution come out, and it's like,
while he's president.
I know that. And gives some wonderful speeches, which Jonah Goldberg has said his speech at the 150th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is fantastic.
Fantastic speech.
Which he gives on July 5th, 1926.
Because?
Because that's the date it actually got issued.
Because July 4th was a Sunday.
And when the mayor had scheduled the event, he caught flack.
Yeah, well,
he caught a lot of flack.
Wow. All right, we're going to cut this at this point and come back shortly with our second hour of the show with no name. Obviously, a fascinating discussion. I got two famous historians here, and we'll let the other one get a word in edgewise in the second hour. But meanwhile, I'm Bob Going with Gavin Murdoch, David Pietrusza, Robert von Hasseln, and off to your far right, Jim DeKosha.
Off screen.
He's only that far off because he wasn't planning on coming. I didn't have time to adjust the camera. And we'll be back shortly with more of the show with no name.